Okay, welcome to Imani's book talk. The camera is just a little bit tilted. We're not gonna talk about that. Okay, so I'm gonna be doing my book talk on Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This book, fun fact, it's one of my favorite books. This is my second time reading it. I gave it a 4.5 stars out of 5 in my head, but a 4 out of 5 on Goodreads because I just love this book. I really do love the book. It's so good. And I love the story. It's like a crime thriller mixed with like a coming of age romance, and it's like really heavily detailed in nature. So I really loved it. It's basically about this girl named Kaya, and it's set in the 50s and 60s, like those kinds of decades. It surrounds a girl named Kaya who is known as the Marsh Girl. She's this like super outcasted person in her society, and they live in like this weird part of North Carolina called Barkley Cove, and it's a very, very racist, very prejudiced against women and like POCs. So, and like she was born like 1946 or something like that, because in 1952 she was 6. 1946, so she lived in a time that was not very great for women or people of color. So it was like she was definitely outcasted. She grew up in this like swamp area that was like on the outskirts of Barkley Cove, and it was like literally like a shack. Like it was in the forest, in the woods, and there was a shack and there was a swamp. And it was like where all the boats would come in and fish and stuff, and she lived near that with like her mom, her dad, and like her 5 other siblings, 4 or 5. So as she like grows up, she realizes that like people are definitely prejudiced against her. When she's 6 years old, she literally goes to school for one day, and they ridicule her because she can't read or spell. So she grew up illiterate. She didn't go to school. She stayed on her marsh. It's called the marsh. She stayed on her marsh with her siblings. She was specifically close to her other sibling who's like 7 years older than her, Jody, who was like he was a really smart guy, who was super sweet. He was super protective of her specifically. So yeah. But then it like we get like introduced to her and like her life a little bit, and then boom, it like cuts to like 1969, and there's these 2 cops talking, right? And I think their names are like Jim and Tate. Let me see, like Jim and Tate, or no, not Tate. Tate is the guy. What are their names? Jim. Let's see. Jim and I can't find their chapter. Jim and some other guy. We're gonna name him Paul. They're the sheriffs of the town, and one day they come in. There's these 2 little boys running and screaming, saying like, "Hey, we found a body in the marsh!" And they're like, "What? Like, we found a body in the marsh? Found a body in the marsh?" And they're like, "What are you talking about? Take me to the marsh, right?" They go to the marsh. They see Chase Andrews on the ground dead. And who is Chase Andrews? You may be wondering. Chase Andrews, star of the show, white male, pretty, conventionally attractive, quarterback. He's like 21, just a town sweetheart. He got married to this like pretty blonde girl, just a town sweetheart, right? Named Pearl, and she always used to wear pearls. Like absolute like golden couple, right? Like your it couple in town. Great grades, worked for his dad. He had like a really loving family, like absolutely just like the golden child of Barkley Cove. And one day he turns up dead, right? So my hat is falling off. One day he winds up dead. So of course people are gonna be like, what's going on? Why is he dead? Immediately they suspect Kaya Clark, the Marsh Girl. So they're like, we're gonna go get like an arrest warrant for her. We're gonna, take her down, right? And while this is happening in the book, it keeps flashing back and forth from Kaya's life growing up to the court case of the murder of Chase Andrews. Well, she's on trial for the murder of Chase Andrews. So a lot of things happen in her life. She becomes very connected to nature because she doesn't go to school. She doesn't socialize with a lot of people. All her siblings, around the time she's like 7, all her siblings end up leaving because her father is such a drunk, deadbeat father who like abuses her mother, right? Her mother left first when she was like 5. Then her siblings started gradually leaving, and Jody ended up leaving, who she was so close with. Jody ended up leaving. Mind you, Kaya was like 6. So they left this little girl with her abusive drunk father who came home like once every 2 weeks. There's a point in time where he was really nice to her for like 2 weeks, and then she said something, or like her mom sent home a letter and Kaya tried to keep it, and he was like, don't ever do that again. And then he left for like months at a time. They didn't ever have like that kind of connection again. So it was like a very very much like, why would you leave your little sister, alone with your deadbeat father, who was a deadbeat father? But that's a different story. So all her siblings end up leaving. There's like definitely like a lack of socialization. So she is like mentally and like emotionally in a childlike state for a long time. But she's very, very intelligent because she is so connected to nature. And she loves nature. She loves the birds that she can see. She loves like the fish that she collects. She basically had to fend for herself when she was like 7 through like 17, 7 through like 19, because she would like collect like oysters from like the bay of her marsh and go sell them to Jumpins, who was like a black store owner, who like sold like boat parts and stuff like off the coast of the marsh, and like she would go and sell them. She was like straight up hustling money. So long story short, she had to fend for herself, right? Very much traumatizing for a little girl. So she still couldn't read until she meets, when she's like 12. No, when she's like 9, and I think he's 12. She meets this guy named Tate Walker. Now, Tate Walker was like 13 at the time, as I said, 12 at the time. Tate Walker is a special character because he is so sweet, right? He sees like she doesn't really have anybody. Her dad just stopped coming around altogether. He sees that she doesn't really have anybody. So he offers to come over and teach her to read. And at that point, like, they had seen each other for a few years, but she never really said anything to him because she's so like recluse. She's very scared of like humans and stuff, so she never really said anything to him. So when she was like 13 or 14, and he was like 16, 17, 18, he taught her to read. And again, they were the only 2 people on the marsh. You know what I mean? Like, they ended up falling for each other. And Tate ended up really falling for Kaya. Like, really falling for Kaya. And he's like, I can't do this with you. You're like literally 14, right? And she's like, I'm grown up. And he's like, no, you're not, right? Mind you, he's turning 18 soon. So they're very close, right? They're literally proclaimed boyfriend and girlfriend without the relations. And which still doesn't really sit right with me, because I mean, like, he was kind of like, are you a predator? Like, I don't really know. How much are these pages? Oh, by the way, the book is 368 pages. Wait, can you see? Side note. The book, oh my gosh, the book is 368 pages. Okay.